Hey, welcome! If you're a contractor working in the Granite State, you know how confusing the rules and regs can be. Well, in this quick explainer, we're going to cut right through all that noise about licensing and bond requirements in New Hampshire. Let's dive in. Okay, let's start with the big one, the question every single contractor asks. Do you actually need a state-issued license to work on a project in New Hampshire? And here's the answer, which honestly might surprise you. No, absolutely not. That's right, New Hampshire is one of those rare states that does not have a statewide license for general contractors. And you know what? That one single fact is the key to understanding everything else we're about to talk about. So here's our game plan. We'll quickly go over New Hampshire's unique setup, what the state actually regulates, why your project's location is everything, the special rules for public projects, what these bonds really cost, and then we'll wrap it all up with a super simple compliance checklist.
All right, so if there's no general license, you might be wondering, what does the state even do? Well, it turns out they focus on a handful of very specific, specialized trades.
So trades like electricians, plumbers, gas fitters, and HVAC techs, yeah, they all need a license directly from the state to do their work. But here's the interesting part. Even though they need a license, the state doesn't require any of them to get a surety bond. For the state, the license itself is enough. And that brings us to what is, without a doubt, the most important thing for any contractor in New Hampshire to understand. If the state isn't in charge of bonds, then who is? Here it is. This is the golden rule. Forget about the state capital. In New Hampshire, all contractor bonding requirements are handled at the local level. We're talking about the specific city or town where you're actually doing the work. For instance, if you're working in Manchester, Nashua, or Concord, they might require you to get a bond just to pull a permit. The huge takeaway here is that the rules can be completely different from one town to the next. That means you have to, absolutely must, call the local building department before you even think about starting a job.
Now, there is one big exception where state rules do apply, and that's when you're working on public works projects. This is where you'll hear about something called the New Hampshire Little Miller Act.
So what is it? It's pretty straightforward, actually. It's a state law that's all about protecting taxpayer money. It says that contractors on public jobs have to get surety bonds. Why? To make sure the project actually gets finished, and just as important, to make sure all the subcontractors and suppliers get paid. So when does this law kick in? Well, the magic number you need to remember is $100,000. If your public works contract in New Hampshire is worth more than that, then you're going to need to get bonded under this act. The act specifically calls for two types of bonds. First up is a performance bond. This one guarantees you'll finish the project just like the contract says. The second is a payment bond, and that makes sure your suppliers and subs get paid for their work. And listen, for both of them, the bond has to cover 100% of the total contract value. Okay, so whether it's a local town or a big public project that's requiring a bond, the next question is obvious. What's this going to cost me? Let's break down what you should expect to pay. So let's talk numbers. Let's talk about your budget. When a city or town says you need a bond, what are we actually talking about in terms of cost? The good news is it's probably way more affordable than you think. It's really not bad at all. The cost, which is called your premium, is just a small percentage of the total bond amount. Usually it's somewhere between 1% and 3% if you've got good credit. So let's say you need a $5,000 bond. You might only pay around $100 for the entire year. You know, this visual really helps put it in perspective. That little sliver, that's your annual premium. The huge part is the total financial protection the bond offers. You're basically paying a very small amount to secure a massive amount of coverage, and that's what gives the project owner real peace of mind. Phew, okay. We have definitely covered a lot of ground. So let's pull all of this together into a simple step-by-step checklist to make sure you're always good to go in New Hampshire. Here's your 4-step process. 1, just drill it into your head. There is no state general contractor license. 2, know the exact town or city where your job is located. 3, and this is the most important step, you have to call that local building department and ask them about their specific bond rules. And finally, 4, check if your project is a public one over $100,000, because that'll trigger the Little Miller Act. Seriously, if you remember just one thing from this whole explainer, let it be this. Always, and I mean always, contact the local building department before you start any work. That is the absolute golden rule for staying compliant and avoiding some really expensive headaches in New Hampshire. And that really just leaves one final question for you to think about. As you look at your next job in the Granite State, are you 100% sure you're fully compliant with all the local rules? If it turns out you do need a municipal bond, or maybe you're bidding on a public project, the process is incredibly simple. You can get an instant surety bond quote in just a few minutes over at buysuretybonds.com.